So hello and welcome everybody to painting a street scene, and this is part 2. So I'm just waiting to see that I've gone live. I just want to make sure that everything is as it should be before we begin. I hope that you've got everything ready that was on the list that we supplied. So hopefully you've got a piece of paper, you've got your pencils, you've got your brushes. I've got my watercolours right here. You can just see those. I might just pull the camera back a little bit further and you can get a better view of what I'm doing. So the camera's wanting to change its orientation a little bit, so let's give it another go. Right. So let's see, I think that should be right. So I'm hoping that we are all set. So let's see. Let's see if everything's all set up and ready. It should be live now. I'm just checking that the orientation is correct. So I'm hoping that you can see everything that I can see. Right, so we are hopefully the right way round, the right way up, and we can make a start. Okay, so beginning with your pencil. Now, this is the picture I'm going to be painting today. So we've got our street scene. Now we've got quite a lot of foliage. So there's a lot of trees. It was very autumnal, and yes, there's a lot of things that we're looking for here at the moment. We're looking for, where are we going to put these long verticals? So I've got my square. It's the same shape as my picture here. I'm going to start plotting in some of these tree shapes. So I need some verticals. So I'm going to start to draw those in now, start sketching those in. Now, this is, as we did last week, we're just looking at where things are. So where is that wall going to be within the picture? So that wall sweeps around, and we've got a beautiful curve within this image. If you can see that, there's a lovely curve going on, which sort of leads us down a lane. So I'm going to, on the right side of this picture, I'm just going to start by getting some of this detail on this side. So I'm going to be careful here. I'm just holding the photograph next to my drawing that I'm doing, and I'm just checking that things are lined up in the right places. So we've got a bit of pavement round here, and there's a lot of autumnal leaves that have scattered around the pavement. So that's going to be, we're going to be bringing quite a bit of colour into this. So I'm going to take my rubber, just rub out some lines that I don't need and leave behind the ones that I do. Now looking again, we've got a great sweep going around this corner. Now this will be quite tricky to make it accurate. So for now, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be spot on with it all right away. Just sketch in, and as you go along, things will start to take shape. So there we've got the curve sweeping around. And then we've got some tiny little details in the background, just some little bits and pieces. So I can see a little car far away in the distance there. So I'm just going to put that in place, but I'm not going to do any more with that, because I might come back and check that in a minute and look again and say, is that in the right place? I often ask myself these questions, and as an artist you'll find yourself doing that throughout every stage of your work. So as you begin a painting, you're asking yourself questions like, have I put that tree in the right place? Have I put this in the right part of the picture? Have I left enough space for the other trees that are going to start appearing in the picture? So now I'm going to bring some other trees in. There's another one a little more central this time. Yeah, so that's got a lovely big branch coming out from there. So I'm just getting that into place now. So all of you should probably, I mean, if you've got your own image that you're working from, this is the time, I'd say the first quarter of this session. We've got 45 minutes. So for the first 15 minutes of this session, I would like to think that that's the time where you will be putting everything where it needs to be. So I'm thinking, where is that tree? That tree is sort of behind this branch. So I can see the branch of this tree and I can see this one just coming up from behind it. So this is the second one. Third tree, this one. This one's going to be much bigger, this one that's a little bit closer to us. So this one's got some sort of, they're ivy covered, I think, or it's possibly ivy. I think it's sort of leftover autumn foliage. So we're going to have a look at techniques that you might like to try a little bit later on when you've got your brushes ready and you've got your watercolours ready. So there's a building here off to one side. This was a mosque, and I was on the bus going through London on one of my visits there late last year, autumn, as you can see by the leaves. And I just thought the colours were so beautiful. There was this golden leaf colour, and then there's also this beautiful golden top to the mosque building. And I just thought, and then it complemented the leaves on the ground so beautifully. Some things just stand out when you're walking around. Look for those things. There might be something that you think, a colour, you know, the colour in the landscape around you, and it could be anything, could be anywhere. You'll be walking along and you suddenly think, I mean, I do this, and I think, oh, I've got to take a picture. I'm so glad I've got my phone, and I've got a good camera on my phone, and I can just capture that. Then what I do is I'll save them up and I'll look at them, you know, maybe a couple of days later. When I'm relaxing, I'll go through my photos, and some of them just jump out and you think, oh, I like that. I like the colours. I like the overall look of that. It's got good balance to it. And the more you do this, the more you will find out what you like and what you like to paint and what inspires you. So just keep taking those photographs, and it's so easy when all of them are digital, because you can just delete them. If you take something and you're not happy with it, just delete it. So I'm looking at these leaves over here now. They're arching quite nicely across our road. And there's this lovely little sort of lane disappearing. And so I've got a little bit of light down there at the back of that road. So I'm going to try and capture some of that as we go along. But I do want to make sure at this point that everything is kind of where I want it to be at this stage of the painting. So I'm just going to bring these branches up a little bit. So yeah, so all of this is called plotting in, where you're just plotting where things are going. You're making decisions at this point. You're making changes at this point. So this is the time when you might think, I'm going to just adjust that, or exactly as I'm doing now, I'm thinking maybe that needs to just alter a little bit. That's better. Now I'm going to hold the original next to it, and I'm going to shut one eye. They're almost the same size, and I'm going to use my pencil to just tell me, have I put things in the right place? So I'm hovering my pencil over, using nice straight horizontal pencil, and I'm just seeing, have I got everything in the right place? So this is just a guide, so this might be helpful to you at this point. So I'm just guiding myself around the picture with the pencil, measuring, checking, Going back again, and just seeing if everything is in the right place where it needs to be. We've got a few details coming through these trees here. There's a wall, which I haven't begun yet. The trees are actually on the other side of the wall. So I'm going to get that wall in. It sweeps around the corner really nicely there. There's some signs there on the wall. So it's starting, you can see it's starting to come together. Hopefully yours is as well, whatever you have chosen to paint today, I hope yours is as well. Just keep on looking and looking again at your reference picture. So I just want to have a look at that pavement in the background and just see where that is. So I think that kind of looks in the right place to me. So this has a little door on it, this little building here. Little arched door. So I'm just sketching that in now. It's got some detail, but I don't want to put all of that detail in yet. I will come back to that later. So I'm just checking the heights of everything. I don't know whether that's quite right. This building on the right, on my right, may be a little bit too tall. So I'll just check that now. Before I actually apply any paint, it's best to check before you do any more, because it's harder to adjust it. Once you've applied your paint, it's going to be much harder. So it's best to make those changes now while you can. So now that we're still working in our pencil, and that gives you that opportunity to make changes. So maybe a few more branches. So I'm going back to the branches now, just getting them into position. I don't want to overdo it with the pencil because it might affect the colour of the watercolours. So if you go in too heavy with the pencil, it can adjust the watercolours as you apply them. So just keeping it quite loose. And now there's a lot of dark foliage here in this corner, so that's going to be blocked in fairly dark. Now I'm going to start, I think I'm ready to get my colours. Are you all ready to get your colours? Okay, so we're going to start by taking our brush and I'm going to start with some of the darker colours, some of the shadow colours. So I'm just going to check them on my piece of paper. All I'm doing here is just seeing if I've got the colours right. This is like a colour test. So yeah, I'm going to start by adding some of these trunk colours for the trees. So I've got some nice dark browns, and I've got that neutral watercolour that I like to use a lot, that I used last week. And I'm just going to start. Now this technique is just like a dabbing process. You're not just applying it in straight marks. Imagine you're that tree or that bush, and you've been grown in a very organic way. You're not so try and think about, how is that tree, how has it grown itself, what have its leaves done, how did it get to have those shapes around it? So when we're doing tree and foliage work, it's a dabbing process. So you take your smallish brush and you're sort of stippling and dabbing your paint. You're not applying it in any heavy way at all. So we're going to just sort of work through from this corner. I'm now taking some more shadowy colour because I'm going to start with this wall. So I want to leave spaces, because if I just bring my original over to you to have a look, so you can see here on the one that I've painted before, this is my other version, I've left some areas where I want this to show as orange. So I want to leave gaps where there's orange. So wherever there's light areas, like through the trees, I'm going to go quite light, and I'm going to leave areas where I can apply those colours afterwards. So I'm being careful not to smother the picture in paint to begin with. It's just a careful process at the moment of building up. So I've got some slightly warmer colour going on here now, and then some shadow colour coming back in. I can always build this up later. So I'm actually working on the left side of the picture. Now there's a reason why that is helpful with a picture like this, because if you start on this side, you may be tempted to rest your hand and smudge work that you've already just done. So there's a good reason why it's often better to just start over here. Start with this side, especially with these dark browns and blacks, so that they don't get all smudged in. So I'm just stippling. I'm applying the paint really lightly, and then I'm looking for where the branches are. Where are the branches coming out? So there's one or two over here, but I'm applying it very, very lightly. I don't want hard lines. This has to look organic. I want these trees to look natural, as if they've just naturally grown there, which they have. So trying to avoid hard, sharp lines, just keeping it quite loose across the page. Just filling in here and there. So I'm just going to look for, where is that wall? Where's the base of that wall? So I want that to be a little bit sharper, that line, but that's, you know, that's because that's a built man-made object, that one. So I can see some warm colours appearing in the pavement now. That's where I'm going to grab a little bit of orange and warm that colour up a little bit, because this is where some leaves have fallen. So I want to create that warmth. I want the warmth to be there within it. I don't want those lines to be too heavy. I'm going to take another brush with nothing on it, so maybe just a little bit of water, and then I'm just going to lift off a little of what I did. So I don't want it too dark at this point. So this is something you can do. Just take a brush, a clean brush with a tiny bit of water, and just lift away if the paint starts to look too heavy. So now we've got this lovely sweep going round a corner. Then I'm doing a little bit of sharp line for the pavement that I can see. Then over here, there's the other side of the street that I can see as well. That's quite shadowy, this part of it. So I'm just getting that in. There's some dark shadows in that doorway, so I'm just getting those into position. I can go over that in a little while. I'll just get that a little bit darker. So I'm just bringing that down to about there. That's about ground level. Then just going to bring these very fine lines. I'm using the edge of this brush again. This is the brush that I was talking about last week. It's got it's kind of like a flat filbert style. So you can use it to get your fine lines, but then you can also use the other side of it when you want to go a bit wider and get wider lines. So at the moment, I'm blocking in some of the areas of the buildings that I can see, but I do want a slightly greyer colour. So I'm coming back in now with a little bit more grey. And then that's giving that a little bit of depth and shadow there. Might just fill that all in completely. Then we've got some detail across the top of the building there. And then we've got the roof. It's got a very low roof, just a shallow roof there. I'm just going to sketch that in. So now over this side, there is some shorter trees that are just hovering over the street. So now I'm using a technique which it's just pushing the paint around. I don't know, there may be a technical word for it, but I'm just pushing the paint around to get the effect of some medium-sized round trees that are growing just here. So a lot of this is just moving your watercolour pigment around until you get the effect that you want. Then I'm going to bring some branches up. And there's part of the building over here. So we've got, at the moment I'm going back to some trees again. So I've sort of covered quite a lot of this area now. So I'm just going to go back to doing the trees over on this side. So I want those branches and the tree trunks to all be in position, because the next stage will be for me to add all the leaves and the foliage. So I'm just looking carefully at what can I see? I can see branches overlapping each other. There's one coming over here and sort of not joining that tree, but it's going across the top of the tree. Some other ones. So looking carefully at the directions that the branches are taking. There's another smaller tree over here. So at the moment it's just a case of just getting all of these, the more structural parts of the picture really, these the larger branches and the overhanging branches, they will sort of pull the whole thing together when it's finished. So now I just want some sort of neutral colours. Over in the corner there's a building that isn't really a white building, but it's kind of a neutral colour really. It's obviously, it's been painted white, but it's not like super white. So I'm just adjusting to see if I can capture a little bit of that colour that I can see there. And then there's a bit more wall, so I'm going back down to that. And then I'm going back to just see if I can make that trunk a little bit darker. This tree I think is wider than I first sketched it, so I'm going to just make that tree a bit bigger. So this one is in our foreground. Next, so I'm just going to make sure this is all in shot for you. That's better. So next I would like to begin, I'm going to take a different brush now and I'm going to get some of these autumnal colours ready. So I'm taking some orange and I'm taking some yellow and I'm just getting my colours ready. I want a range of colours. I don't just want one orange colour. I'd like to make a few colours. So I'm just making a couple of different ones, some more subtle than others. Some might be a bit greener. So I'm now going to begin by, I'll see if I'm happy with that. I'll just test it over here on this piece of paper. Yeah, I like that colour. So I'm just going to start with that colour. Again, stippling. So it's just, you're taking the brush and you're just dabbing it. Using the tip of the brush, you're just dabbing it. There is a fair bit of water on that brush, but I like that because when it dries, you're going to get some interesting marks. And yeah, they're just more interesting if there's a bit more water involved. I am working on quite a nice thick piece of paper, so hopefully if you've got some thickish paper, it will take this layering of colour quite well. Now, to one side of my picture, there is autumnal leaves, but they're not just orange. There is some green still left behind from summer. So I'm just going to intersperse a little bit of green into the orange. And they're almost joining together. I can't see a lot of sky on this side of the picture. So I'm being careful not to touch my hand onto this. I know I did recommend don't work on this side of the picture. So those of you who've spotted that, well done. But I am quite careful with my brush. So, but I would just say, try not to do it if you can help it. Or if you are going to work all over the picture, just watch out for the areas that you've just done. So I'm going to come over to this side and just get some of these details. These are more in shadow. So there is some colour, but not as much. There's a little bit of orange over here, but definitely not as much. So I'm just, again, it's just all over quite evenly, but I do want those leaves to look quite small, so I don't want to get too big with the marks I'm making. So I'm just keeping them quite small and quite delicate. It's just the impression of light coming through autumn leaves that we're going for here. So that's a bit heavy. I'm going to just do that with a dry brush. If it gets too heavy, I'll just blot it off. So you can just lift off what you've already done, and then you can make marks as well like that. So you could sort of move that around a little bit to give the impression of trees. Just be quite free with your brushwork. Don't get too like bogged down, you know, be a bit experimental, see what happens. You know, that's the interesting thing about working with water and medium like this. You'll get some interesting incidents that you might not have expected to happen, but that keeps it interesting. That keeps, you know, it makes it more of an exciting challenge in a way. So because I've got some of my gold colours, they are ready and they are mixed up, I am going to just see about just blocking in some of this that is the roof of the mosque. So I'm just going to block that in there, but I'm going to leave space. There is foliage as well coming down from, over the top of it. So that's just blocked in ready. I may come back to that in a minute. So I'm just going to start thinking about these leaves and this foliage again. So I'm going back over to this part of the picture, using some of those greens to just get that stipple technique happening. And there are some really light greens in here as well. So I'm going to see if I can get some of those in. So it doesn't matter if they run together a little bit, it's fine. It'll all probably add something to the picture as you go along. So we are about half an hour in to our work time. So what we're going to start doing now is, this is when more of the detail will start to come in. So I'm looking at, where do I want, there's lots of leaves that have fallen in the road. So I'm now just getting those leaves into position. I'm just sketching those in like that. So again, don't go too heavy with it. Just apply it where you think you see it. So I can see some on either side of my street. The autumn leaves are just built up when they fell, but they are creating some really nice colours on the pavement there. So I'm just looking for those at the moment. Then there's some going up and around this corner, but the colours are a little bit more faded as you go up and away around the corner. So I'll just keep that quite light. This brush I'm using now, by the way, I thought I'd tell you a bit about this. These are bamboo, it's got a bamboo handle, and I believe it to be goat's hair. So they're really fine. They've got a good point on them, but they're lovely for watercolour work. They're really nice, and they're nice to handle as well. And they don't cost very much either. So it's always good to have a nice range of brushes, and then you can put one down and pick one up and see which one suits you know, the kind of work that you're doing. See, if I use this very, very fine point on this brush, you can see it's very delicate. So it's just giving me the impression of finer branches coming off from these trees. So it's just the kind of effect that I want to get, you know, just keeping it really light. So I'm just going to block in some of this. This is quite dark over here. So this is a wall or a fence. So I'm just going to get that in now. So what I want to be thinking about is the overall balance of the whole picture. Have I got all of the elements in position now? I'm keeping a close eye on where is that going. That's going around that corner. But also, I don't want to over paint some of the other things that I did that I quite like. So there's also some light here. There's lights on this, there's some reflection on this road. This is very dark over here, so I think that needs to be quite dark for the rest of it to work. So as I go along, I'm just making decisions like that. So I'm just starting to get some of those fine details in place. Now, I'm looking around to see which parts of the picture need a little bit more work. Now over here does. This needs a bit more work. So I'm just doing that foreground. And then I'm going over to this side. This building does have some details and it does need a bit more work. So I'm balancing the picture at the moment. So I'm going back and forth a bit now. So I'm just looking for things that might need a bit more work doing to them. And then I don't want the paint to become too heavy, so I'm just going to lift. That's background, so that's way off in the background. Generally, things that are further away have a much paler and faint quality, so I want to capture some of that. It'll give us a feeling that that's far away in the distance. They're just little techniques that help with your picture and your composition. So this is maybe, I'll just give this some graduated tone, so it's not so solid. But there is light on the road, so I want to keep that impression that there's a bit of shadow and there's a bit of light as we turn this corner in the distance. And keep that sweeping round, but not, let's just fade that out now. Not too much paint there at all. So you can see it's starting to come together. It's starting to look a bit more finished, but it's not finished yet. I maybe want a little bit more detail here so that we can, I want to be able to see that that's a curb. So I just flatten that out a little bit. And then there's shadow here on the side of this building, but there's also brickwork. So I'm just going to suggest that with the finer brush that I use. So it's just showing that there's bricks there. And that's the detail. That'll just give us a little bit of focus there on that building. So some areas need a bit more work, and I'm going to start going back over previous areas to just help to get some balance there within the picture. So there are leaves over on this side, so I want to try and capture some of those, and these are they're in our foreground of the picture, so we will be able to see a fair bit of detail there. There's also some really nice leaves over this side that are sort of obscuring some of the building. So I'm going to see if I can get some of that. So I'm just getting some sort of natural neutral colours that are in between the orange and the greens. This is just so that I can look at it and say it looks like there's trees and foliage above the buildings. So there's a little bit of shadow and definition there on top of the building, so I want to just get that in there. But there's also some details that I don't want to lose either. I'm just going to bring that building up a little bit more. There's a building just in the way, so that's better. So we're in we've got 10 minutes left approximately. What I'm doing now is I'm just dabbing, lifting off, moving some of the things I've already done, just to give it a little bit more definition. Now, going back to where I can see some highlights, I'm just going to go back. I left gaps there so I could paint those leaves in after, a little bit later. So I left them like that deliberately. Now I'm just going back over to just show a little bit more detail. So now I'm going to take my pen. This is where we get our pen and we just lift out things that we think might help the picture. So here I'd like a bit more focus. I want a bit more definition. So I'm just going to go in with my pen. Here I want more focus and definition. I'm just applying that with my pen. And then over here I might want to make it look like there are more branches, more sort of things growing, things happening. So I'm just dotting my pen here and there. I'm also sketching where I can see that wall. Now the pen gives me more definition than the brush. So this will just tighten this picture up. So this is, we're getting into our last 8 minutes. So this is the point where your painting should really have some form and depth in it now. So I'm going to look for anything that really needs work now, needs attention. So there's a little tiny car in the background. So I'll just do that, but I don't want it to be too overly significant. And then some background colour again, going back over there. I think that needs a little bit more to tell us what's going on in the background there. There are some lights on, so I'm going to see if I can just suggest that now. I'm going around the areas where I left clear to put my lights later. So the colour might be a little bit, I'm just going to warm up that green with a little bit of orange. And then coming back over here, I think this tree in the foreground needs a bit more work as well. So I'm just going to, I want to be able to see a bit more detail all across the picture. And I think a bit more shadow on this building. I don't want it to look too bright. Now these are the areas that have there's some tiny road markings going across. I'm just going to carefully see if I could suggest them by adding a bit of colour but not too much. And then these areas are darker again in the foreground. So yeah, this is almost finished. You can kind of see there isn't really a lot more that I want to do to this now. Just maybe tiny details, bits and bobs here and there that give it more a feeling that you can see detail against areas where there isn't detail. This could do with a bit more just there, but maybe not that much. So I'll just lift away. If I've applied too much, I take a brush with a bit of water but not too much, and but you'll get the feel for that. The more you paint, you'll know how much water you need and how little water you need. It just becomes more of an instinctual thing. The more you paint, the easier that becomes to gauge. You just make the medium work for you in different ways. So looking now at that, I'm quite happy with that overall. I'm just going to go across and see if there's any things I can add to it that will improve it. I think it just needs a bit of yellow here and there, which I can see in my original photo, and it's just giving the impression that there are more leaves now. So maybe going back into the orange, because it is quite dark there, and that'll give it a bit more depth. So this could be a bit darker as well. So I'm going for a slightly deeper orange this time in this corner here, and then moving the paint around a bit until I feel it looks right. So that's just, I'm going back over these trees and these leaves over this side, just so they've got a bit more definition. It's a little bit blank there in that area there, so that's improved it, I think, a little bit. So I'm just going to stand up now and have a look. If you can, if you're able, where you're working, just stand up, stand back, and have a look across the picture and see if there's anything that you think it needs. I personally think my picture could be a bit darker in the foreground in this corner here. So I'm just going to now go over that, because I think that's what it needs to really give it the definition from foreground to background. So I'm just doing that now in this last couple of minutes, I think it'll just help some of the lighter colours stand out against some of the darker background colours. So it's just looking for things like that at this point in your painting. Maybe a few more leaves here, could do with a bit more foliage, I think. Just here and there in the trees that are overhanging. Yeah, so I think that's improved it. I think that bringing that down a bit darker at the front has really pulled that together. Maybe a tiny bit more over here. Don't worry if the colours run together. It'll be much more interesting when it dries. And then I'll just make sure I've got that gradiating quality. So it looks like it's shadow getting lighter as we go around the corner. So I'm just applying and removing the paint where I think it will work. That's it. So if you've applied too much, don't be afraid to just grab a tissue, dab it off if you think it doesn't need that much. And then with my pen, a little bit of pavement detail, and then we know that that's a pavement. Looks a little bit more realistic, doesn't it then? There's even some people walking along very far away in the distance there. So I think that time-wise, we've just about come to the end of this session. I'm just going to lift up my tablet to say thank you for watching. So I hope that you've enjoyed that session, and thank you all for watching, and happy painting.